The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. You're in the right place if you're looking for our monthly care coordination info share session. And we're very glad that you're here today to talk about some of our more important topics du jour. And I'm Kara, and Delight Mills is with me, and Kat Lipinskis is with me. And also we have Anna Williams, Meg Sampson, and Damon Silva with us here, all SDS staff. So I'm going to go ahead and open my questions here so I can take a look at them and we can stay connected that way. Everybody knows how to attend the webinar, I'm pretty sure. I did want to remind you that if it's possible for you to download on your device, you could download in the handouts section. There's a few PDF documents there that you can download. If your device does not take downloads for whatever reason, that's okay, not a problem. We can always email you the documents afterwards. This, like all of our sessions, monthly info share sessions for care coordinators, they are worth 1 hour continuing education. And just look for the email that says save this email. And you'll want to do just that, save the email and keep it on file so that you can turn it in to count for care coordinator CEH. We don't issue separate certificates for them just because so many of us had different kinds of problems receiving the certificate. We're just going the old-fashioned way for this particular monthly event. Just sending an email. Give us a couple days to do that. Takes a while for us to get the recording done and uploaded to YouTube and things like that. Okay, so we have some interesting things to talk about today. I'll start out with reminders. We did, of course, have one of our most recent e-alerts go out on the 27th about Appendix K flexibilities being extended. And it was very much like last minute. Basically, in a nutshell, the Appendix K flexibilities that were set to expire on November 11th are not expiring on November 11th. The other flexibilities that were discontinued in May are not reactivated or anything like that. Things just stayed the same. November 12th is the same as November 11th, in other words. So that is the gist of it there. In the e-alert, it contained all the details and it explained quite a bit about each one, more of like as a reminder for everybody. I would imagine our audience here is pretty familiar with the flexibilities, and in the handouts here, not only with the agenda, but you'll see a copy of that e-alert in flexibilities extended and detailed information about it. Also a copy of the letter to families, because we're hoping, to explain it to our individuals and families, just because it's been sort of a roller coaster with the different changes and endings projected and then continuations. So we're really happy to share that with you. Also, we're having a webinar about this very topic on Wednesday, November 8th from 12 to 1. Our info share agenda, it actually did go out with the e-alert. There is a link on the agenda. I'm not going to click it, but it's a go-to webinar that was shared out through the actual e-alert that went out. So we had quite a bit of people signed up for that, almost 200 people. So I think the word got out pretty well. But that's just as a reminder, if you want to register for that, our director, Tony Newman, will be talking about the flexibilities extended. And I think that's it for our introductions here. Keep on writing in your questions. We'll have a special presentation, a learning topic here with Delight, and just more sharing of resources after we're done talking about our special topic of today. Go ahead.
So I'm going to
Thanks,
introduce the
Kara.
light and the light special topic really quickly if I can. And this may not apply to everybody, but we did receive a lot of feedback and a lot of questions about care coordinator contacts. And so our training team took all of those kind of comments, questions, concerns that were sent to me, to them, to other folks at SDS. They came up with a really good training about the purpose of care coordinator contacts. And I think because through the pandemic, we kind of moved away from doing some of those contacts and things look different for a lot of us in the last 3 years. Some care coordinators started in the pandemic, so they never really had the pre-pandemic care coordinator work experience. So the Light and team came up with a really good training just as a reminder to us about contacts. And again, this may not apply to everybody here, but I think it'll be a really good refresher. We received some kind of some concerning feedback about working with individuals who may not be verbal or who are using nonverbal communication. So I think some of the presentation would address that as well. I think I want to drive in the fact that visits are to connect with the person, and sending an email and texting are great, but they're not really ways of connecting that. And the regulation that we have doesn't specify that email is okay. The regulations say phone or distance delivery is okay. So we're going to talk more about that. And that's not to say that you can't text and email people. You can still do that as a follow-up in addition to your contacts. But I think we really need to drive in home the need for that connection with the person. We know it's not uncommon for guardians, including OPA, and maybe specifically OPA, to prefer email contacts. And I think that's great. We did have a meeting with OPA, and we did have some guidance from them to care coordinators regarding those contacts and how to make sure that those contacts happen. But again, we really need to focus on not replacing those face-to-face or distance delivery visits with other methods of contacting people, so like emails and texts. With that being said, Delight, if you want to take it away or add something, please feel free to do that. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for setting the stage, Kat. We have gotten a lot of feedback from you all, and that's great. It means that you're aware and engaged with the changes that are happening. But as Kat said, we did a learning assessment of what the feedback we had, and there were several different themes that came up. And so we've decided to come up with this training today that it requires your help. It's still a work in progress. Today, I'm going to need you to help me finish this presentation because I know that some of you are very, very skilled coming up with creative solutions for building connections. So I'm going to be relying on you at different points today to help us come up with different ideas. The entire point of this presentation is about building connections. So what are we going to be talking about? Let's see if we get it going here. First of all, what is the point of a contact? I think it's really normal. It's just part of our society to think about all the billing and the logistics of the billing and all of those components. But we're going to dig into the purpose for this particular service because there are many services as a care coordinator that you offer and bill for, and this is a very specific one. Next, we'll come to the big question about how contacts have changed. What was it like before the pandemic? What's it like right now with flexibilities? And what will it look like when the flexibilities end and the regulations are implemented or put into effect and start? Okay, so 3 different concepts to walk through when we get there. And then we'll go through the fun part of tips for connecting. We're going to look at case studies. And this is kind of an exposure for you if you have never been to an office hour. This is a very similar experience to what you would have in an office hour when you'd come visit us when you have a case where you're not sure what to do. We'll show you kind of how we walk through those and explore those case studies that are on very specific themes from the feedback that you gave us the past few days or a few weeks. And then finally, we'll talk about what to do if you can't connect and make that contact, okay? So that's our agenda. And with that, we're gonna dig into what's the point? Well, contacts are required because the Alaskans we serve qualify for institutional level of care, meaning that they're at a vulnerable or fragile state that they need oversight. That's part of the contact, to oversee that the plan that was artfully prepared is working, is going according to plan. Our Alaskans need a trusted and neutral support. That's you, the care coordinator, to help navigate some very, very heavy topics. Health and safety is a very heavy topic, bogged down with logistics and emotion and all sorts of components to it. That is something that you help them with. You also help with civil rights and self-advocacy and helping people know when maybe they've never been informed that they have a right to do something or to make a choice. And that is, again, where your role of building that connection comes into play, of connecting with that person and supporting them so that they can tell you about what's going on in their life and you can support them through those different avenues. And then finally, let's just be real. Sometimes the experiences of the people we serve are very private and embarrassing, and they don't want to talk about them. They don't want to talk about them in public, or maybe they don't want to write it down. There are a lot of reasons why someone might be embarrassed to explain the services that they really need to be able to be healthy and safe. And so that's why it's really important for contacts to be part of long-term care services to support the person that's receiving the services, helping them have that space where they can have these difficult conversations and explore these very difficult topics. That being said, that we've changed a lot in the course of care coordination, where before the only way you'd really do that is face to face, and we've really changed the dynamics of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. But I really want to acknowledge, what skills do you bring when you make the space to work through this? Well, you build the skills of building trust, establishing that rapport with that person, and you do that with respect. And you also do that with a sense of innovation, of coming up with creative solutions to either the problems that those obstacles that are preventing that person from being independent or included, or innovative in how you connect with them so they feel more comfortable in exploring those barriers. Okay, so those are things that they're like what we would call like social skills that are so essential for a care coordinator. And that's what it takes for you to make those kind of connections. So how has things changed? Well, before the public emergency, health emergency, every month, 2 contacts, 1 in person and 1 alternate contact, right? Public health emergency happens, and we, as a nation, like the whole nation, said it was not safe for us to have those in-person contacts. And we developed alternative ways to do them, those virtual connections. Right now, we're still in a continued public health emergency. The flexibility, although it ended, like it ended, they're extending all of the rules for that. So right now, it's still okay to contact your client twice a month through all the various channels that you have available to you. The email, the texting, the HIPAA safe Zoom, like all of those things are all on the table. But what happens when those flexibilities end? And you can come tomorrow to the webinar tomorrow to learn more about all of that. But like, what's the regulation that's going to go into effect? Well, for ALI, APDD, CCMC, and IDD, it's 2 monthly contacts still. That hasn't changed. Those contacts can be a phone call, distance delivery, which would be like a telehealth kind of connection, how telemodality, HIPAA compliance, and whatever you want to call it, however you make it happen, virtual connection. Or you can meet them in person. That's totally viable. You could meet them in person twice a month if that's the best way to connect with that person. But you have to meet with them in person at least once every 6 months, and it has to be within that range. So I couldn't have a meeting in May in person and then have a meeting in June in person and count that as 2 in-person contacts meeting my requirements. You need to spread them out a bit so that you can monitor the service. ISW, the significant change is that it's just 1 contact a month. Okay, that's the big difference. Still, any of the ways to connect, phone call, distance delivery, or in person, and 1 in person within 6 months. So a little bit more about the in-person. In those 2 annual in-person visits, 1 has to be in a location where services are delivered, and 1 has to be at the person's home where they reside. We've got a lot of questions about what if they don't get other services? They just have PERS and they just have care coordination. Like, where else would I meet them? Well, you can meet them at their home twice a year, or you could meet them at their home and then at the senior center or at the bowling alley or at the coffee shop. But one of those places should be their home. So Kat, at this time, do we have any burning questions that need clarification? We appreciate all of your feedback and thoughts, engaging in it. We're just trying to keep the topic pretty narrow and focused as we go through this. What do you think, Kat?
So there's a couple of comments about, that 1 visit every 6 months may not be sufficient, and then that might create, kind of open doors for unpleasant surprises, maybe abuse, exploitation, things that the care coordinator wouldn't know about if they're not visiting more often.
That is a very good point. It may not be appropriate to meet once every 6 months. This is a lot on your instinct as a care coordinator and your person's needs and what really is monitoring of services, meaningful monitoring of services, meaningful oversight of someone's health and safety. You may have to and should meet more often if that's the way that you're going to be able to ensure safety. Other thoughts?
There's a couple comments about this is the minimum. Yes, the regs describe the minimum. Your person quite possibly could need more than this. Different concerns about the minimum. The regs are just the minimum. There's nothing saying that you couldn't do more if a person needed more visits. That would be acceptable.
And encouraged, right? Because again, remember, we're working with some of the most vulnerable populations in Alaska, and we need to keep them, like, help them be safe and help them, support them in their independence and making sure the plan is going according to plan. Well, thank you all for your thoughts. As you keep entering them in, we do appreciate it. But this is where I'm going to start really engaging in, what would you do ideas, okay? Because we're going to walk through a couple of case studies. They're all made up. They're all pretend. They're just made up people, names, ideas. But what I'm really trying to tap in here is part of what we learned through a lot of the feedback received was that care coordinators are a little nervous about what's to come. Totally normal. How will it work? What should we do in certain situations? And this is just an exercise to practice coming up with ideas on how to encounter those situations and skills of engagement and what could you do with it, okay? Because we're just prepping you and priming you for connecting and building those connections. So first case is about communication. So we have Felix here. Felix is in high school. He communicates by gesture, uses some sign language. He can type and text and use text messaging on his phone or in a video chat. So this person can type away. He understands but does not use spoken words. You're not sure how he represents what he's thinking or feeling by text, but he loves to do it. He's in school in life skills class, and he has supported living at home. What are your thoughts on how you would build a connection? So you can put in, off the top of your head, what would you do to try to connect? And then if this was a real case that came to office hours, is there anything that Kat or Kara or any of our other panelists would want to know about Felix in order to connect and to build a connection? So please feel free to type in, and Kat is monitoring. So some of the questions I have is I would really be interested in what Felix is interested in. And I would have a lot of questions like what does he like? What are his favorite activities? So that I could build rapport and maybe engaging in that or learning about that particular interest of his so we can share connection through that. I'd also like to learn more about his family and his guardians and what they observe about Felix and how he communicates and connect with him. So those are some of the off-the-cuff questions that I would ask about Felix and kind of thinking it through. So what are some of the things that our care coordinators are saying they would do to try to build? Oops, I'm going to go back. And I'm going to type in your answers.
I think you've got what people are thinking, because there's some comments about, what kind of things is he working on in his life skills class that he likes? What does he do for fun? What does he want to see or do later on in life? Maybe talk to his teachers and caregivers about their observations of him. Definitely exchange numbers in person and maybe do some texting. Definitely do face-to-face visits, and then you could, if he really prefers to text during those visits, but still be face-to-face so you could see those reactions.
That's a great suggestion. That's really creative because you're kind of using multiple forms of communication. So I'm loving that. Again, remember that everybody communicates in different ways, and sometimes how you and I, you can't see, what's totally going on in this room. There's some dogs back there, but it would probably be easier to understand what's happening around me and how I'm reacting if you were with me, right? So, and then combining that engagement so that you can understand the differences and methods for communicating. So these are all great great suggestions. We kind of thought about some other suggestions as well before we move on to staff, kind of what staff thought about. Anything else?
Meet with him somewhere where he wants to meet. So find a preferred place, maybe ask to join his class and interact with him and maybe do some observations that way. If I'm missing some of your comments, guys, I am so sorry. There's a lot going on there. I'm trying to be the only person that reads it, so we're not repeating things. Ask a lot of open-ended questions and try to avoid those, yes or no questions that don't really lead to a conversation. I think we got some really good feedback here.
Yes, don't assume he has a guardian. I want you to always presume competence. No matter what anyone has told you, no matter what you see or observe, just treat everyone like a person and presume competence. That gives that level of respect that is not only a right, we all deserve respect just to be humans, but it really bolsters that trust so that you can have more in-depth conversations about what life looks like after high school. Does it include staying with mom and dad? For some people, yes, some people no. So I'm really happy to see these kind of ways of thinking this through. So what are some of the things that we kind of thought? Well, try to connect via video chat, text, email, combinations. You guys got it. You figured that out. Say those are the things. Use different tools to build a connection with Felix. Because remember, you're the neutral force you're in Felix's corner, so to speak, with all the different dynamics of school and guardians and just neighbors and activities and providers. There's you being there and just being a neutral force in this person's life that supports him unconditionally without judgment is so valuable. I did hear you say visit school. Yes. What's life like in different environments? The environments, because we're not always at home. Some people, they do spend quite a lot of time at home, and that's okay. But there are times when we're in different environments that we choose to go to, we want to go to explore, to experience. If you get a chance to be with that person in those environments, that's a great way to build a connection based on their interest. And it's really about developing that connection by being with them. Listen to them. When someone uses nonverbal communication, you may not be listening with your ears. You may be listening with your eyes or with listening through contact if someone squeezes your hand. Thinking about these different sensory connections. And that's really critical with that skills of observation. Any other thoughts, Kat, that you're seeing come through that you think we need to touch on?
There's some feedback about schools not being a billable visit place. There's a couple of care coordinators that have mentioned that, so we can address that outside of this meeting, and I'll do some investigating into that. But there's been some feedback about that. And then there's other comments about music, connecting over music, connecting with all the team members, just making sure everybody knows what's going on. And some really good comments about presumed competence, and even guardians being surprised when a care coordinator was talking to a person and asking them direct questions, and the person responded. Even the guardian was surprised about the person's responses and involvement and being involved in their own planning. So.
Awesome. Thank you all for participating in that. Next case study. Let's get to the next one. This one is about the theme of trust. We've heard a lot about this. Martha was connected to your CC agency with an APS referral. You've yet to meet her in person or see her home. You know that her home may be unsafe to live in. On your first phone call to set up a meeting, she stated she doesn't want anyone coming to her home. And she's already changed care coordinators because she was not comfortable working with your male colleague. How would you build a connection with Martha? So go ahead and type in your questions. And while you, or like, would you want to know anything about Martha? How would you connect with her? And then, Kara, is there any questions that you could think of if a care coordinator brought this to you? Or is there anything that in your mind is important to consider about trust when you're thinking things through on these? Because it's pretty common for people to say, aren't you with the government? Like, I don't know if I want the government to like to come into my home, you know?
People are going through a lot, you know, especially with these kinds of situations. You know, it really is about developing your skills of interaction, seeing the person for their humanity. I know, like, we've been doing this work for many years, and myself from many perspectives. I always find it easier when we see the humanity of the person and relate to that person on that level. I know people come to us with a lot of needs and a lot of circumstances that others would lay a lot of judgment on. But because they're with you, that's their opportunity to have more smoother things happen, I think. And even if it doesn't seem that way, because sometimes people aren't super happy to see us or super jazzed that, you know, now there's a new person in my life and oh my goodness, what do I do now? Just know that some of those difficulties and some of that pushback and hardness that you get from people is most likely a coping skill. And I say it plain because everybody, I know everybody here, I'll just say it plain. It's because people haven't experienced a lot of control and mastery over their own life due to their circumstances, not because of who they are as a person. And it reflects that way, but due to their circumstances, people don't get a lot of choices. So when we talk about, you know, helping people through these times, anything you can do to help put that person in control, even if it's something small, will go quite a long way. And, you know, just stick with them, because sometimes the biggest, most powerful thing that a person has been allowed to do is to say no and push people away. I know we've all worked with people who don't, you know, accept staff and things like that. And even family members are like that and things like that. Just begin to introduce some of that positivity into their life little by little, and it will go a lot better. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Kara. That's so helpful because what we often hear when we hear no is like, it's kind of hard not to take it personally and be like, no, like you don't want me to come see you. It's not personal. It's not. It's just that person is trying to protect their heart. They're trying to protect themselves. And so you have to slowly build that trust. Kat, what's some of the top 3? And I know you are putting in lots of ideas. Thank you for that. But we're just going for the top 3 quick ones to kind of go off of that we would put in here.
So
what do you
build
think?
rapport and build rapport by, you know, meeting where she's comfortable. If it's outside of her home, then that's fine. But meet with her where she wants to meet you, just to kind of build that relationship and build that rapport. There's quite a bit of comments on that. There's a really good comment about maybe bringing a meal and building a relationship that way. Meeting in a safe place, you know, place that, again, she would be comfortable with. And be respectful and respect the person's choices. And if they choose not to want to meet with you at home, like you were saying earlier, Delight, you know, meet with them outside of their home, or in
You
a
could meet
place.
on their porch.
Right.
You can you can park in their driveway and have them sit in your driveway. Like, and like, whatever it takes for them to feel, to make like whatever is easiest for them, right? And making that connection. There are, when we implement the new regulations, yes, this forms some structure of telephone, distance delivery, and in person. But that's just to ensure that there's quality of care, of connection, and delivery of service. Like we said before, it's okay for you to be creative and to text. And like, I know that I do not appreciate cold calls when people just call me randomly and be like, I'm coming to your house. Sometimes you got to send a text first, be like, is it a good time to give you a call? Maybe that's what you'll have to do to build trust and gradually get to the point where you can meet in person. So again, thank you for all of your creative and innovative ideas. What did we come up with? This is kind of like Family Feud. Like, what was our top answers? Guess what, guys? You're pretty much on the money, because we said meet in a neutral location. Like, meet where it works for Martha. Offer choices. And again, I heard, build rapport, be with them, listen to them, anticipate. You can't always anticipate needs, but over time, if you learn and connect with the person, they'll feel comfortable telling you about what they need. Okay, so it really depends on building that relationship. So next case study. This is based on the theme of technology. So Dean likes to text, he likes to email, and he uses social media. So you ask if he'd like to try distance delivery care coordination, but he seems uncertain. This really surprises you. He says there isn't a point of connecting that way. How would you build a connection? Now, we've heard this one quite a lot, and it does relate to the email text connections, where we've heard like people like to email and text, that's what they prefer. And that is okay. That is a critical tool in support plan development. But this is a little bit different. This is about contacting them, connecting with them, and oversight of delivery of service. So this one, when we think about technology, what are some of the questions and thoughts that we might have about this case? Is there anything that comes to mind? One that I thought of is maybe Dean doesn't have the best internet connection. And so, yeah, texting is fine, emailing is fine, but like connecting telemodality of like with cameras, not fine, and he knows it. So you just have to kind of ask. Do we have some good, I see we have some good comments coming in, Kat. Seeing things
There's
that
some
you
good
think.
comments about respecting his choice and meeting with him in person, like what he prefers to do. Comments about, finding out if he maybe does FaceTime with family and friends, or does he have another way that he would like to do a distance delivery? And explain the purpose of what the care coordination contact, if it was done via distance delivery, would be for.
So I really like this last one about explaining like what's the point, right? Because isn't that, doesn't that always help if you understand like why are you trying to come into my house? Like, why are you always asking to come into my house? Like, it's a little weird. Explain why. There's so much that information that Alaskans have to give to DPA, to SDS. And so, of course, they're like, this is one part of my life that you guys aren't going to look at. Like, totally valid and understandable. But at the same time, we have to ensure that connection and safety, and that's where that monitoring of delivery of services. And we can do that respectfully by giving informed consent. Kara.
Thank you, Delight. So there's lots of great comments here about home visits and people you know, not wanting people to be in the home and things like that, and being embarrassed of your home and things like that. And I can definitely attest to all that. And, you know, it might be at the beginning of your relationship with the person, you could probably explain, you know, what does this mean and what does it look like? And then tell the person that, you know, I'm not here to inspect your home. I'm not going to go into places you tell me not to. This doesn't mean that you can't have privacy. This just means that we're visiting at home. And what I'm hoping to do is partner with you to help make life easier for you through the services that we could possibly get. And, you know, there's 100 million stories. There's infinite stories about how life could be made easier, sometimes with services and sometimes something completely different. You know, what I mean is waiver services. It's sometimes something else. And a lot of us are really coming up with some really good ideas. I like the one where it says an offer to help them with anything they're struggling with, i.e. help them follow up on equipment or stuff they need. Show them your value. I really like that. Show them your value, because once you have an ally like a care coordinator in your life, then it doesn't feel quite so risky, you know, to open up your life and your private home to that person. It's a very respectful way of thinking about it. So I just really appreciated that comment. That's all.
There's a really good comment also about maybe contacting Atla and making sure, you know, checking if there's access to better technology for that person to maintain contact, not just with a care coordinator, but with other people in the community as well.
That is a perfect segue to what we were thinking about when we talked this case through. When we were talking it through, you guys nailed it. Like, yeah, you can meet in person. Like, you don't have to do anything distance delivery or by phone. You can meet, like, if you want to meet in person, that's fine. One of our team members said maybe they want to have that physical, like, in similar space, and that's okay. Offer to practice. It's really important that we're sensitive to the digital divide, because it is a real thing. And we cannot let our Alaskans be left behind because no one's willing to practice with them. And sometimes it feels very high stakes for our Alaskans, because it's like, we're doing a tele-assessment right now and like unmute your phone. And it's like very like, you know, they're not used to the technology, you know, it's just overwhelming. So making space to offer opportunities to practice, because you're a safe person to practice with unmuting their phone with, and like looking at it, looking at those kind of technological barriers that just doesn't work for them, that causes more stress than necessary when there's alternative ways of connecting, but giving space to practice and being open to the learning curve. Everybody is at a different level with their technology, you know, and it depends day to day and how technology is working. Like, sometimes it's way above our skill set, and sometimes we're complete experts, but it just really depends. So you may find that you may offer to practice with somebody, and you may find that they're way more skilled than you are, you know, but being open to give them that opportunity to practice, to do those distance delivery contacts. It may start that you do those contacts in person just to try it. Like, well, if you have your phone and I have my phone and I call you, like, what happens? And like, why is it making all this extra sound? Oh, feedback loops. Oh, so that explains when we have the, like, people don't know unless you talk them through it and experiment with it. So giving people those chances to practice, and taking the time to do that is really, really powerful in building trust and making connections. And really ensuring that people aren't left behind, because it's staying. Like, virtual connections are staying, virtual contacts are staying, because they worked during the pandemic. They worked. We were able to make sure people could see their doctor, they could, have assessments. So that we have to make space for it, but we need to make sure that everybody is included in that space. And that means really being innovative and helping people connect with it, and adapting and understanding if they're not into connecting with it, that's okay too. Okay. So any other thoughts before we go into our last case study?
We got a ton of really good ones, and I think we'll incorporate them somehow in the PowerPoint later on. But there's some really
Oh,
good.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Because we can, and gals, I think we can definitely take all of your feedback and include it as part of, because this is really a think tank experience right now. Karen, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say really quickly, I know you were talking about people who communicate communicate non-verbally before, without using words. And there was a little story that's where a care coordinator went to a visit and was wearing a black coat. And this was the child. The little guy was scared of her because he had a negative experience with somebody taking him out of his home, and the person was wearing a black coat. And so she didn't know that. She just showed up with a black coat on. And so that made me think about, the whole concept of trauma-informed care. You can take some classes through Center for Human Development, I believe, about trauma-informed care. And in communicating nonverbally, I know that most of us probably know that about 90% of our communication is actually nonverbal. So it's not like we're very different than people who don't happen to use words. So just know that, the way you move and the way you hold yourself and the way that you dress and things like that might be really important to somebody. So it would be really good to think about those things. Of course, it's impossible to know everything, and you're going to make some mistakes, but that's not because you intentionally, wanted to make that kind of a mistake. But you just never know what it's going to be. And I would not discount the whole nonverbal communication and presentation piece at all.
Thank you for that. All right, so our last case study, and we're getting a little short on time, so we may not spend too much time at this case study, but it's an important one. So our next study is about OPA guardians. So Layla is self-employed and lives with a roommate. She does have an OPA guardian that is difficult to connect with. Layla has said she doesn't know who her guardian is. How best would you connect with OPA, and how would you build them into the team? So give us your OPA tips. But I'm also curious about what do you think about this? Is there anything that anybody has any questions on or thoughts about it? If this was presented to me, like how to build a contact, I'm just going to spoil it for you and jump to it and say, Layla's the primary contact. Layla's go to Layla. For that contact, connect with Layla. Because OPA knows that she's safe because they know she has you as a care coordinator. So as far as case management and concern over Layla, OPA Guardian's she's good. She's got a care coordinator. Not to say they're not important, but that is a really big dynamic that I want us to acknowledge, because far too often society, we're going big here, society emphasizes other players in the planning team and underplays the role of the person themselves. You can get your contact accomplished by meeting with Layla, by calling Layla, by video, like video engaging Layla. So that doesn't mean, like, we have tips for you about, because of course you're going to need signatures, of course you're going to need them to connect, but I want to emphasize that your relationship really should be with Layla, with your client. And that's true for other dynamics too, of like across the age, like the cycles of life, and there's guardians and there's parents and there's guardians and there's all, like, there's daughters and there's sons and POAs and whatever. They're all important within that person's circle that surrounds them of support. But we want to really emphasize that the person is who we want to make contact with, and that is our primary connection point. Any good tips you're seeing in the chat about what to do to connect with OPA, how to connect with them?
There's a comment about maybe calling the local office with Layla and helping her locate her guardian that way. There's
That's
a
great.
comment about providing OPA with email updates and meeting with the recipient. So that's really what you talked about. So the contact is with the person, and then you send an email or text or some kind of other form of contact to OPA to keep them in the loop and keep them updated. And
So
okay.
I still have the question about clarifying about us calling the client versus them calling us, counting as a contact. My best answer to that is that you want to stick with the ones that the care coordinator initiates, because it has this, it's stated that way in regulation, but also it's that way because we don't want to have scenarios where, I know this doesn't happen, right? And it wouldn't be something that would happen. Like when I say it, it sounds horrible, but we don't want to have care coordinators telling people, well, you have to call me, you know what I mean? Like I'm not available to help you unless you call me. It's up to you to call me when you need stuff, da 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 da. We want to always go with the care coordinator initiated one. And you can certainly write down, the information that you get with the person and things like that. Or if you told them to call you back at a certain time because you all were setting up a meeting, that type of thing. That's different than what I just said. What I said was setting up an artificial rule about, you'll have to call me to reach out. That's not a thing. A care coordinator calling the person is a thing. A person calls you back when they're ready to talk. Fine. You initiated it. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. The connections. One last tip in this area, Kat, or it looks like there's so much coming in that it's okay. It looks like I'm gonna have to take a lot of your content and put it in the notes section of the presentation, okay? So we'll make sure we put that in there. It's gonna take us a little bit to do that because you guys have really good feedback. But when we met with OPA, we kind of came back through, you all nailed a majority of them. Layla's your contact, connect with her. Love that we want to get Layla connected to her guardian so she knows what's up, like who's this person, like because you want them to have some rapport so that they can connect with each other. That's great. When we met with OPA, they said that reaching out by email really helps, but they really need it in specific topics, like the what, the why, and the deadline for it. And they really cannot do last minute responses. They have to have at least 2 weeks deadline runtime because of their caseloads. So takeaway, start that email contact, put it in your subject line what you need to connect with them about, and give them a time frame for when you need that action taken, action-oriented emails. If you leave it vague, if you leave it without context, they're not going to prioritize it because they're working with cases that have high stakes situations that have really defined priorities. So you have to be really clear about your priorities of like, if you need a signature or if you need a review or anything like that, you're gonna have to be really clear about what you need. And so their biggest concern was getting a vague voicemail of, hi, I'm a care coordinator and I need you to call me. And they're like, about what? Like, why, when, where, who, what? So be really specific when you engage with their teams, because they really are trying to prioritize. They're really doing health and safety supervision and problem solving. So they feel a lot more comfortable with their clients because they know you're in the story. Okay, so it's not that they're dismissive of you, it's that they trust you to make sure that your clients are safe. So I want you to understand that it's because they know you're a professional that they're like, all right, they'll be okay. We're about to wrap up on our time. And so I really am just going to click through these last couple of slides for you. I really want you to remember that we just want you to try to connect. Be innovative and brave in your connections, because you're the leaders in our field of social supports. You really are, because you're taking that connection and making this holistic about the person and helping them be included within our community. Our real, when you have those situations where you can't connect, please try again, because this is level of care situations. You might need to do a wellness check. It could be an emergency situation. Try to connect with them. And you can't, if you need to, you may have to file a CIR, but think about that as part of your role, is that connection as a mandatory reporter. And if there's an emergency, you may have to call law enforcement to do those wellness checks. And then as far as like all the billing stuff, I know I'm kind of being dismissive about it, because really this entire training, it's not that I'm dismissive of the process and how important it is for your professions, but for this training, this is really about that contact with that person. So it's a very if you didn't contact them, don't bill for it. That's really all as far as I want to go into that for you, because this is really about oversight and support of that person. So that kind of comes to our key takeaways. Our Alaskan is the primary contact. They're number one, not the guardians and maybe the agency representative at the home or whatever. It's them. They're the one that you want to engage with and build rapport with. Virtual communication is the future. Offer choices, offer opportunities to practice, use your, I'm hearing all these, connect with Atla, all these different opportunities to connect with technology. Your connection and oversight is critical for our community. We need you. We need you to do this part of it. And that's why we made it a billable service. That's why it's billable, because it's about making sure someone is safe and that they're supported, that the services work. So last thought is just to express gratitude for you. Thank you. Thank you for connecting with Alaskans. Thank you for being creative in your connections with Alaskans. I know that a lot of these flexibilities and all this stuff, let's just be real, there's a lot of content, a lot of information, and it is a lot. So what we want to do today is regroup back to the basic purpose of connection with our Alaskans. You were called to this service because of that, and for that, we thank you. Anything else, guys?
If you come up with, other questions or suggestions, let us know, maybe today or tomorrow, so we could gather all of that and add it to the PowerPoint. But thank you for coming. We took a whole hour, guys, but it was a really good discussion.
Yeah, thank you all. And then tomorrow's webinars with Tony and Jordan, and Tony Newman and Jordan Grant, and they're talking about the like what's happening, like just the basics of like what's happening with flexibilities, not the details of all the flexibilities, but like why is it extending and what's going on with it, what's extending, and all of those pieces. We've informed you through those documents that have been circulated in the alert. Tomorrow's really going through just like what's happening with it with the federal requirements. All right, thank you all so very much, and we'll let you enter in your last thoughts, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.